Hello, everyone. This is Kathy Xu, Editor-in-Chief of Tourism Management. I would like to use this opportunity to provide you with an overview of the journal and my observation as the editor in the past 3 years or so. The scope and positioning of tourism management as a journal, actually, it is a very broad-based, management-oriented journal concerning with the management planning and policy of travel and tourism. And we take a holistic viewpoint to indicate that tourism is an umbrella industry, is a whole, a single industry that comprises several interdependent segments that includes accommodation, transport, tour, attractions, some of the catering services, so on and so forth. So really we take a very broad view, therefore research generated based on any of these segments that are housed within the overall tourism industry are welcome to be submitted to the journal. And we do take an interdisciplinary approach. We've seen authors based on their disciplinary background, for example, coming from economics, geography, psychology, information system, and so on and so forth. And increasingly, we've seen submissions from authors who are housed outside of the tourism academic unit. For example, we've seen submission from the schools or departments of environmental sciences, engineering, finance, HR, and so forth. Now, all the papers published in the journal are required to contribute to theoretical and or methodological advancement, in addition to provide specific implications for the tourism management and or policy. So we really look at both academic rigor, contribution to knowledge, to push the boundary of knowledge advancement. And also we would like to have research published that really make a difference, that can actually have actionable specific recommendations for the industry. And obviously, innovative topics and perspectives that challenge traditional paradigm are always welcome, so that we can together move the tourism research forward. A little bit on the matrix, although we don't put too much emphasis on it. This is just for new colleagues or new researchers coming into tourism research that are not very much familiar with the history of the journal or the current standing of the journal. These are here just for your information. Anyway, it's a very well-positioned, well-respected journal in different countries and different disciplines. And here is some additional information in terms of the ranking based on SSCI of the different categories. Even within the broad management category, tourism management is ranked quite high, and all in the first quarter. This is the latest Google H5 index, which and also under the business economics and management category, it is ranked number 5, just below the Journal of Business Ethics. And so you can see 122 indicates that 122 papers published in tourism management actually has a citation of 122 or more. And that's quite impressive. Now, in terms of the download, the UK and China are the primary users, you can say, or the readers of the journal, has the largest number of downloads, followed by the USA and Australia. But really, it is quite global. As you can see, the dots really scatter around many countries. In terms of publication and acceptance, just a bit of a logistic or the housekeeping matters, really. We publish 6 volumes a year, and about 2 weeks from the acceptance, the paper will be posted online with a DOI. So that means the turnaround is quite quick. Once you get the letter of acceptance, the manuscript will go to production, and you will get the page proof in a few days. You need to return the page proof usually within maybe 2 or 3 days, and then the papers will be published with a DOI online quite rapidly, about 2 weeks. Now, a volume is compiled every 2 months. So the longest time anyone has to wait for a paper to be quote unquote published is 2 months. So whenever the next volume is compiled, then it is considered published. And each paper will have a unique article number. The annual submission is quite high. We get about 1,900 submissions per year. Because of the high number, we do a number of screenings by the editorial team. Firstly, we have the managing editor to do a first round of desk review, and probably the managing editor will screen out about 35% of the paper, and then the papers will come to me, and I will screen out another 35% or so, and then the papers will be dispatched to associate editors who then take another look and usually screen out another 5%. Now, the reason why we do this, obviously, because of the volume, but then at the same time, if we send a paper that we don't see has the potential to get published out to the reviewers, reviewers will come back and say, hey, why are you wasting our time? Because reviewer time is very, very valuable. And at the same time, we don't want to waste the author's time. Sometimes it's not about the quality, it's about the match. It's about the fit of the paper and the journal. So authors need to look at the guide for authors very closely to see if the piece actually fit under the scope or the remit of tourism management. The review time for each round is about 8 weeks. We usually give the reviewer 4 weeks. However, it takes some time for the reviewers to accept the invitation, and then sometimes the reviewers don't always submit their review in time. So generally, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks for each round of review. At the end of the day, the acceptance rate approximately 6 to 8%. It is very competitive. Sometimes a paper goes through the first round of review, first round of revision, go out for review again, and it doesn't always get accepted if a paper goes through 1 or 2 rounds of review. However, the chances of getting acceptance is higher further down the road. In terms of the submission, we require a short 150-word impact statement. This is something that we introduced in early 2020. We want to inform the readers, particularly industry practitioners, whether it's the public sector, private sector, what contribution or beneficial effect this particular research brings to the wider society. The wider society, the economy, the culture, public policy, services, health, quality of life, the environment, so on and so forth. In other words, it's a statement about impact beyond academia. Very often, authors mistaken this section for an abstract of the study or theoretical contribution, but this section is about impact beyond the academics. So research impact, I understand different countries, the UK, including us in Hong Kong, Australia, and some other places now really put a lot of focus on the impact of research. Now, so the question is, does tourism research matters, right? What real life questions can we answer? What real life implications do we have? For example, over tourism, under tourism, how can we support the industry? Whatever phenomenon is out there, what can our research contribute? Simply by finding a relationship between A and B doesn't really make a lot of impact. The question is always, so what? And that's very often a question asked by the reviewer. Yes, you found a correlation between A and B, but then what can the industry do based on the research of your study? So one recommendation that we have is to involve the stakeholders early on in the research process. Before we raise the research question and move on to the research design, we show the question to the industry or the government and saying, hey, do you think that's an important question, right? If I have a question and then we come up with the answer, would that influence you? Can you use the results of the study? If their answer is no, it doesn't really matter, then probably that's not a good research for the tourism management journal perspective. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do basic research, but everything I say is about coming from the perspective of the journal. So practical implications should not be an afterthought. It's not something that at the end of the manuscript preparation, and then we sit down and think, what can I come up with in terms of practical implication? Really, the impact needs to be very carefully thought out and be integrated into the entire research process. We're also looking for a rigorous methodology. We have to have rigorous research to have reliable results to provide practical implications confidently, right? If our research methodology is a bit shaky, then the results may not be reliable. And then if we say something to the industry and say, hey, this is what you should do, what if we're wrong? So the research process has to be very, very rigorous. And we would like to publish studies based on multi-method, very thoughtfully designed. Multi-method could be a combination of qualitative, quantitative survey, experiment, big data, or direct measurement. Now with the technology and equipment become better and better, smaller and smaller. Some of the biological measurement, psychophysiological measurement devices can be taken out to the field, so we can do direct observations. Big data, we see a lot of big data studies submitted to the journal, but then there is a difference between data-driven research and very thoughtfully designed research using big data to support or to advance a particular line of theoretical inquiry, right? So if it's purely data-driven, we have lots and lots of data, and this is the results of data analytics, it doesn't really have that rigor that we're looking for. It's just a different form of summarizing, describing a phenomenon. Multi-study, multi-sources of data can actually help us enhance the external validity of our study results. So obviously, in the past, maybe in the past 2 decades or 3 decades ago, very often the studies were based on a cross-sectional survey, and we all know how surveys' limitations are. There are quite a bit of sampling errors, measurement errors, and so on and so forth. So scientific theories should be testable. New evidence should be compatible with a theory, right? So if it's not, then maybe we should refine the theory. We suggest that the theory doesn't really work in this particular situation, therefore it should be refined, or the theory could be rejected. But then before we reject a theory, before we reject a commonly understood relationship, we cannot say that with confidence that the study is based on a one method set of data, right? So the more tests it passes, then the stronger the theory. So that's why we would like to see multi-method, multi-study, multi-sources of data to really give us the confidence that we have tested this once, twice, 3 times, and results are the same. Therefore, the external validity has been established. As I mentioned, in terms of observation, we've seen a lot of big data study, and now with the AI, recent few years, a couple years actually, we've seen a lot of experimental design studies. Very common is that we see a manuscript come in with 5 experiments. Yes, they're good, but then they need to be integrated. They need to be thoughtfully designed. How do they relate to each other? And rather than having study 1 testing 1 hypothesis 1, study 2 testing hypothesis 2, again, we're looking at repetitive testing of a similar relationship that we're trying to establish. Scale development, again, we've seen scale development papers coming in left and right. Many of the authors argue that because of the COVID-19, especially in the early 2020, 21, or even 22 last year, authors argue that the construct that we understood pre-COVID now should have a new definition and therefore need a new skill to measure. For some cases, yes, that's true. However, it doesn't mean that everything needs to be re-examined. And also skill development, yes, sometimes you come up with a new concept and saying there's no skill to measure it. I can understand where the authors is coming from, but skill development, the skill that you develop is a tool. How do you use the tool? Rather than saying, I developed the skill, somebody else can use it, the authors need to demonstrate here is the skill and this is how I use it, and actually it works, right? So skill development is only part of the process rather than the entire process. And then the question about multi-study, is it a matter of packaging or really it is multiple study that can help enhance validity? Unfortunately, we have seen some papers coming in that saying it is a multi-study, but actually it's just multiple phases of one study. For example, for skill development, as an example, you have to go through the entire process, right? You cannot call literature review as study 1 and preliminary interview as study 2 and then expert review as study 3. So really it's not about packaging. It's really the purpose is to enhance validity of the research that we do. A couple more points. Based on observation, research is not a production line. And talking to other editors, we also see similar things. We can identify a few production lines, actually, of groups of researchers that come up with very similar, repetitive kind of storylines. And therefore, whatever phenomenon it is, then they run the same thing, right? So you can tell, yeah, this particular manuscript, even without knowing who the authors are, we kind of know, we can guess where that paper come from. That is not how we do research. We would really like to encourage thoughtful, innovative research that about something we're really interested in, rather than using a formula to pump up the paper mechanically. And also another point is method should not be the driver of the study. Method is a tool. We need to identify the questions first, want to find out what, and therefore what is the best method to do it, rather than saying, oh, I know how to use big data. I have this data set, therefore what will be the research question? And then after you analyze the data, you go back and find a theoretical support for it. That's the other way around of doing things, right? So method should not be the driver of the study. Now, theoretical contribution, it is a very abstract and vague term. What is it? It's more than providing empirical evidence, right? It's not just I have this theory as the base and I provide empirical evidence to support the theory. That's applied research. We're looking at, based on this theory, based on your empirical study, what additional things, additional value, additional contribution you can make to enhance that particular theory or expand that theory or help us understand a little bit how does it work, how does it not work in this particular context. And also often we see under the theoretical contribution section of the manuscript, the author will say, no one has done this before, no one has done that before. So each and every construct that they have in the study is argued based on no one has looked at it before, right? That is not theoretical contribution. No one looked at it before. There could be a reason that nobody else has done it before because it's not important, because there is not a research gap. So simply because you're the first one to do it doesn't mean actually you make valuable contribution to the to academia, right? Or actually introducing something to the tourism discipline. Nobody has used this method before in tourism. Nobody has applied this theory before in tourism. Also are quite weak argument from reviewers' perspective. So really we need to go back to the literature and find what are the theoretical shortcomings or gaps that we can find, and we can articulate that in the introduction or in the literature review section. And at the end of the introduction or literature review, then we identify the gaps, and therefore we need to conduct this particular study. And then how does this study enhance the rigor or depth or extend the comprehensiveness of existing theory or theories? So those are the questions that can help us to identify what is the value of this particular piece that we can contribute to, right? A little bit on peer review. Peer review or the going through the referee process really is the QA mechanism. The journals, all academic journals have in place. Hopefully, we can help the authors to make the papers better. We want to publish the best work possible based on the studies that are already conducted. So the peer review can hopefully help the authors to improve the clarity, the logic, and technical rigor. I'm an author myself, so sometimes I don't see things because I know my study so well. I assume everybody will understand, or simply I forgot to mention. So the peer review process is really, really helpful to me as an author. And the reviewers not only offer assessment, but also offer advice to the editor, because as editors, we don't know everything, right? We have our specialized domain knowledge, but if it's outside of our domain knowledge, then we rely on the reviewers to help us make sound decisions. Now, the reviewer selection, obviously, it could be based on topic area. If you study a particular topic area, then we try to find other authors who have published in the area, or based on methodological expertise. Maybe your study is about phenomenon A, and the reviewer is not from this particular lines of theoretical inquiry. However, that reviewer has the methodological expertise. Then we can bring in that reviewer to look at the method. And sometimes we bring in somebody to look at the big picture. Is this important? Doesn't matter, right? So sometimes you may see the reviewer's comment, or reviewers may say, this is not my area of expertise. However, take a step back, look at it from the editor's perspective. We want to get views from different perspectives. So yes, it is true that sometimes we invite reviewers who are not, who does not have the track record in a particular topic area, but we want to get their perspective on the methods or the big picture. Now, this is a typical review process. Probably you have all seen this or you are aware of, but just for your information here. Once we receive the manuscript, we will determine the suitability, and then if it's suitable, we'll select reviewers. Reviewers will respond, and then the editor will, based on reviewer comments, to accept, reject, or revise, and then go back to the authors. If it's a revision, then the authors will repeat the steps in the red box, right? So it could be revision 1, revision 2, until the process completes with an acceptance decision or rejection decision. And this is the setup for tourism management. We do the desk review on the left-hand side. The author will submit, and our editorial assistant will do some initial screening to make sure that the submission comply with the formality requirements. Once it passes that, then it goes to our managing editor, Professor Sungwon Park. And then if it passes his desk, it will come to myself. I will take another look. So the rejection, the desk rejection could come from the managing editor or the editor-in-chief. For those that go through the 2 rounds of desk review, we'll go to the associate editors or myself handle some of the submissions. So we split the work based on our domain knowledge as much as possible. And we have 3 associate editors and myself. 4 of us handle the review process. So we invite reviewers will get their comments back to us, and then we will communicate with the authors until a final decision is made. Now, as an author, number one definitely is to look at the fit of the journal. There's nothing wrong with empirical research. All the comments I made earlier about theoretical contribution, those are based on our journal's perspective. There are plenty of journals out there publish empirical work. Some of the empirical studies are very, very insightful and valuable, and particularly have a lot of implications for industry practice. And those are great, but they don't fit to the remit of tourism management. So first of all, the authors need to look at the fit and follow the guide for authors to tell a succinct story, an interesting story, as you have to go through the multiple stages of review. Now, manuscript should be original. It will be very helpful if the authors can do a similarity check yourself before you submit to the journal, because the first thing we look at is the similarity. As a rule of thumb, similarity check, the total percentage should be less than 15%, and with less than 1% with any of the open sources available online. That puts some pressure for especially students, right? When you complete your thesis, depending on your institution's policy, you may have to put your thesis online the day you graduate. Once your thesis is online, that means when you submit your paper to a journal, you pretty much need to rephrase, rewrite most of the content. Otherwise, the similarity check will come out as pretty high. A similarity check is different from plagiarism. We're not talking about you copying other people's work. It is your own work. However, the issue is blind review. If your thesis is out there on the library, everybody can search and identify, okay, you're the author of the thesis, and there's a high similarity in terms of the content of the manuscript being reviewed, then it's not a double-blind process. In order to ensure double-blind, if there is something out there that has the author's name attached to it, that jeopardizes the process, and that includes preprints. We fully support preprints. However, please don't have it out there until the review process is completed. It's not, again, not about plagiarism, but about remaining anonymous in terms of the identification of the author. And obviously, prior publications will be out there as well. From the author's perspective, please keep an open mind, a learning attitude, rather than being very defensive. I understand how tough it is when we see reviewer comments. Very often, a manuscript is the result of multiple years of efforts, and someone will say, this is not quite right, this is not clear, this is that. It's tough, right, when you receive reviewer comments. But please remember, we are colleagues, we're not enemies, we're here to help. We all have the same goal. We want to have the best work published in the journal, right? So if something the reviewer say that's not clear, being a very defensive author, I may say, oh, it is clear. I think it's very clear, but it's not an argument. If they say it's not clear, that means from the reader's perspective, it's not clear. How can we rephrase it? How can we rewrite it to make it clear, right? So please have a learning attitude, a positive attitude, and an open mind. Incorporate as many suggestions as possible during the revision process. It's not about who wins the battle. It's not about reviewers win or the authors win. It's not to argue. It's about getting the work, again, the best work published and published work in the best form possible, right? It doesn't mean you have to agree with the reviewers. You can provide evidence, you can provide your reason, you can do this and that. We'll have a separate seminar on how to respond to reviewer comments, but incorporate as many of their suggestions as possible. Not too concerned about trendy hot topics or hot topics. Very often the editors get asked, are there any hot topic you're looking for? No, right? We're not the research agenda gatekeeper. It doesn't matter what topic. We're looking at quality. We want to ensure that the work is of quality. As long as you are passionate about the topic that you study, as long as you can justify this is an important topic, then the journal's role is to make sure that this topic you study and you present the study the best way you can. A few points to know. If you do use AI, whatever form of tools that you have at your institution, you just have to declare it. I think the policy is available on the Elsevier website. If you use AI during any part of the manuscript development process or research process, please declare that. No simultaneous submission to more than one journal. We have seen a few cases in the past, even in the past months or past years, we've seen this. Within the publisher, they can identify potential simultaneous submissions. So sometimes as an editor, we get prompts from the systems and saying, hey, this submission appears to be submitted to your journal and another journal. Although I think the system now cannot spot cross-publisher simultaneous submission, but just as a general rule, it's part of the professional ethics, right? We should only submit to one journal at a time. And each journal for tourism management, each journal should have only one corresponding author and one first author. That's just common sense, right? Corresponding author by definition is the author I, as an editor, correspond with. So if you submit the paper in the system, I can only correspond with one person. And author's name are listed sequentially. So obviously there can only be one first author. No change to authorship after initial submission. So please think about the authorship. Who should be authors on this paper and who should be the first, second, and third or corresponding author before the initial submission. Unless you have some exceptional reasons to change the authorship, then all the authors have to agree and they have to send the editor their consent in writing, right? I can certainly understand, for example, one of the authors may have left the academia, or somebody else has expertise that you need to bring in during the revision process. Some of these things occasionally happen, but if that's the case, then all the authors need to agree and a reason needs to be provided. And each author needs to submit an authorship statement indicating their contribution. And finally, please serve as a reviewer and take the role of the reviewer seriously, because each paper is usually sent to 3 reviewers. That takes a lot of it. Just think about how many papers that we receive, even though only a quarter of the 1,900 papers go out to the reviewers, but you take that number times 3, that's a lot of reviewers' time. So as part of the professional service, please help the academic community by serving as a reviewer and serving as a good reviewer. This is taken from the Elsevier Researcher Academy. In terms of readers' flow, I thought that would be helpful for authors to understand how readers read a particular journal article. Usually they look at the title first, and then they will read the abstract. If the abstract sounds good, they will look at the figures. And the figures look, okay, yeah, that's really interesting. I like the results, or I like the theoretical framework. And then I'll go back and read the introduction, and then I'll jump right into the conclusion. So you absolutely need to have a very attractive title, descriptive, inform what the study is about, write a good abstract, spend some time on the figures. Figures need to stand alone. Each figure needs to tell a story, need to be presented nicely so that people will want to look at them. And introduction obviously is important. You retain the author's attention with a good introduction, and then have a good summary. So Researcher Academy is has its own portal. You're welcome to visit the Researcher Academy offered by the Elsevier. They have lots of information there to help the authors, help reviewers, and so forth, right? And finally, I would like to remind our colleagues, if you're interested in submitting a manuscript to tourism management, please go to the official editorial manager website. I understand that there is a merit journal out there, which is not tourism management. I have people send me inquiry and saying that my paper has been accepted. How come it's not published yet? And then we realized that they submitted to the wrong site, and that is not the official tourism management editorial manager site. So please do submit it to the official site, right? So thank you very much, and we will have other discussions on particular topics available at the different webinars that we have planned. So thank you for listening. Hope this is very helpful, right? Bye-bye.